It lasted less than 1 second. One dive. One arm stretched across the Wimbledon grass. One young player throwing her body toward a ball most people would have let go. And somehow, that frame became one of the clearest images of Alex Eala's breakthrough. Not a match point. Not a trophy lift. Not a screaming celebration. A defensive save. That is what made it powerful. Because normally, sports moments travel through the scoreboard first. Who won? Who lost? What was the final score? But this image moved differently. You did not need to know every point of the match to understand what it meant. You did not need to study the draw. You did not need to know the ranking math. You only had to see Eala stretched across the grass, refusing to give up one more ball, and the message was obvious. She was not just playing. She was fighting for every inch of the moment. So the real question is not whether the dive looked cool. Of course it did. The real question is why that one image stayed with people. Why did a defensive point become a symbol? Why did fans start treating it like a Superwoman moment? And why did it seem to explain Eala's Wimbledon run better than a normal highlight ever could? Because the photo did something a scoreboard cannot do. It showed the feeling of the story. And to understand that, you have to remember where this happened. This was not a random side court. This was not a quiet early round match that only tennis diehards were watching. This was Wimbledon. Center court. Third round. Iga Swiatek across the net. The defending Wimbledon champion, a 6-time Grand Slam winner. One of the most respected players in the sport. That is the kind of stage that usually belongs to players with history behind them. Swiatek had the resume. She had the aura. She had the experience. She had already lived inside the pressure Eala was only beginning to feel. And yet, Eala made the match uncomfortable. That is the word. Uncomfortable. She did not walk onto center court like a tourist. She did not play like someone just happy to be there. She stayed in rallies. She absorbed pressure. She made Swiatek hit one more ball. Then another, then another. The first set was not clean or easy. It was tense. Heavy. The kind of set where one nervous service game can change everything. The kind of set where young players often start to feel the size of the moment. But Eala stayed there. She did not rush the upset. She earned the pressure point by point. Then came the second set. And somewhere inside that set came the dive. Eala launched herself across the grass. Body low, arm reaching. No guarantee she would save the ball. No guarantee the point would matter later. No guarantee the image would travel beyond the match. Just instinct. Just effort. Just a player refusing to let the rally end easily. That is why the frame worked. It was not perfect tennis. It was not pretty tennis. It was honest tennis, and sometimes honest tennis is what people remember. Because the image told you what Eala's entire Wimbledon run felt like. A young woman from the Philippines, on the biggest grass court in the world, reaching for something that had always looked out of reach. That is why fans connected with it so fast. The dive was simple. One player, one stretch, one refusal. You could understand it in 1 second, and for Filipino fans, that mattered even more. Because Eala was not just another seeded player having a strong tournament. She was carrying a tennis story the Philippines had almost never had before. The Philippines is not a tennis machine. It is a basketball country. A boxing country. A country with deep sports passion, but not a long history of producing elite Grand Slam singles contenders. Eala grew up inside that reality. She did not come from a place where the path to center court was obvious. She came from a place where a tennis dream had to fight for space. At 13, she left home for Spain. She trained at the Rafa Nadal Academy. She grew up far from family, learning the demands of professional tennis while carrying a dream that still had no guarantee. So when she threw herself across the grass at Wimbledon, that one frame carried more than athleticism. It carried distance. The distance from Quezon City to center court. The distance from being a promising junior to standing across from the defending Wimbledon champion. The distance from a country rarely seen in this part of tennis to a player suddenly impossible to ignore. That is the part the scoreboard cannot show. A scoreline tells you what happened. A photo can show you what it cost. And Eala's dive gave fans a clean visual for something they had been feeling all week. Pride, pressure, defiance, belief. That is why the Superwoman edits made sense. Not because the internet literally thought she could fly. Because for 1 second, the image looked like a player breaking through gravity, not physical gravity. The other kind. The invisible weight that says players from certain places are not supposed to get here. The weight that says tennis belongs mostly to the same countries, the same systems, the same pipelines. The weight that says a young Filipina can be a nice story, but not a real threat on center court. Then Eala beat Swiatek 7-6, 6-2, and suddenly, the dive looked like more than a great photo. It looked like a warning. She was here. She was fighting. She belonged. That is why some images travel faster than full match recaps. A recap asks people to understand the details. An image lets them feel the point instantly. You did not have to explain footwork. You did not have to explain grass court patterns. You did not have to explain how difficult it is to beat a champion at Wimbledon. The picture did the work. Eala on the grass. Arm out. Body committed, no safety net. That is the kind of sports image people share because it says something they do not have to put into words. But the most important part of this story is what happened after the image. Because viral moments can flatten athletes. They turn real people into one frozen idea. Hero, icon. Superwoman, history maker. But Eala is not a comic book character. She is 21. Still developing. Still learning how to carry attention. Still trying to turn one breakthrough into a career. And that is why her reaction mattered. After the Swiatek win, she was emotional, but she did not act like the job was finished. She knew the tournament was still moving. She knew another opponent was coming. She knew one spectacular image could not win the next match for her. That is the cruel thing about tennis. History gives you one night. The draw gives you another problem. Against Jasmine Paolini, the run ended 6-4, 4-6, 6-3. It was not embarrassing. It was not a collapse. It was a reminder. Arrival is not the same as completion. Eala had beaten a champion, but she had not solved the sport. She had become a symbol, but she was still a player with work ahead. And honestly, that makes the dive stronger. Because the image was never proof that she had already conquered tennis. It was proof that she was willing to chase every inch of it. There is a difference. One is fantasy, the other is real. And real is more interesting. That is where the story becomes bigger than one photo. Because the danger of a viral moment is that people can start treating it like the whole story. They see the dive. They see the edits. They see the Superwoman nickname. They see the flag emojis and the celebration. But behind the image is a player who still has to improve. A serve that can get heavier. Return games that can become sharper. Big points that still have to be managed better. A full tour schedule that does not care about emotion. That is the next challenge for Eala. Not getting attention. She has that now. The challenge is growing while everyone is watching. Before Wimbledon, she could surprise people. After Wimbledon, opponents will study her. They will look for patterns. They will test her serve. They will make her prove that the Swiatek match was not only a great day, but a sign of a higher level. That is what happens when a player becomes visible. The story gets bigger, the pressure gets heavier. The room changes. And for Eala, the room has changed. Filipino fans are watching differently now. Casual tennis fans are learning her name. Opponents know she can hurt them on a major stage. The tour cannot file her away as just another young prospect, not after center court, not after Swiatek, not after a Wimbledon run that gave people an image they could not forget. That is why the dive matters. Not because it was bigger than the win, because it helped people understand the win. Not because it replaced the scoreline, because it gave the scoreline emotion, not because it proved Eala is already a finished star, because it showed why people believe she might become one. And that belief is powerful, but it is also dangerous. A photo can inspire people. It cannot protect a player from pressure. A viral image can bring attention. It cannot win the next tiebreak. A nickname can make fans smile. It cannot build a complete career. Only Eala can do that. Point by point. Tournament by tournament. Loss by loss. Adjustment by adjustment. That is why this moment is worth watching closely. Because the image arrived before the full legacy. The symbol arrived before the biggest title. The attention arrived while the story was still unfinished. And unfinished stories are the ones people come back for. If one defensive point created this much feeling, what happens when Eala wins her first WTA Tour level title? What happens if she makes an even deeper Grand Slam run? What happens when she walks back onto center court not as the surprise, but as the player nobody wants to face? That is the future this photo points toward. Not because one dive guarantees anything. It does not, but because one dive revealed something true. People are ready to believe in her. And Eala is giving them reasons to keep watching. That is the difference between a viral clip and a real sports story. A viral clip gets attention once. A real sports story makes people return. They come back because they want to know what happens next. That is where Alex Eala is now. Not at the end. At the beginning of a bigger question, how far can this go? So, go back to the image one more time. Eala on the grass. Arms stretched. Body fully committed. No guarantee she reaches the ball. No guarantee the point changes the match. No guarantee history follows. Just effort, that is what people responded to. Because sometimes a single frame shows the truth more clearly than 1,000 words. Alex Eala was not handed this moment. She chased it. She reached for it. She threw herself toward it. And for 1 second at Wimbledon, everyone could see exactly what that meant. A young woman from the Philippines, stretched across the grass, reaching for something the tennis world had rarely imagined for someone from her country. That is not just a photo. That is the first clear frame of a new sports memory. And the most exciting part is simple: Alex Eala is still writing what comes next. So tell me this. When you saw that dive, did you see just a great tennis photo? Or did you see the moment Alex Eala started to look like something much bigger than a breakthrough story?